What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 136 of the FlipScreen Games podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy. Probably a more relevant ahoy, ahoy than we've had ever in the history of the show, really, because we're going to talk nautical today, really,
Very
right?
nautical, yeah.
Very nautical. I'm a nautical boy, you know me.
You're a very nautical boy?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Nautical by nature? Yeah. How many more of these we got in us?
I actually would like to let's go on, but let's go on. Let's move on. What are we talking about today?
Okay, all right. We're talking about Another Crab's Treasure, of course, which is an indie game that's been on our radar for quite some time. We've seen it at Nintendo Directs. I played it during the Steam Next Fest, and we talked about it on the Steam Deck podcast. And Max was lucky enough to get a code from the developer/publisher Aggro Crab, and was able to review it for embargo today. So thank you guys so much for the code on that one. And Max, why don't you, I guess before we get into the whole rub of it, what's your kind of elevator thoughts on the game so far?
I would actually like to open with a joke, if that's okay.
Please.
So this, I'm gonna ask you. You might have actually already read it now. I'm saying it, but what do clams and the Steam Deck have in common?
I don't know. What do they have in common?
They're both bivalve.
That's actually pretty good.
Thank you very much.
I hadn't read it, thankfully. I think that would have ruined the punchline for me.
That's
solid, bud.
Know? Thank you very much. That's the first thing I thought when writing this review, and I was like, I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to save it. Do you remember where? Do you know where I might have learned the word bivalve from? Because you might have learned it from the same place as me back in the day.
Is that maybe SpongeBob?
No. Before then, so the word bivalve I only ever know as being Sheldat and Cloyster's classification in Pokemon.
The bivalve Pokemon, of course.
The bivalve Pokemon. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Pokemon. We're here to talk about Another Crab's Treasure. So, Another Crab's Treasure is a sort of Souls-like, 3D Souls-like combined with a 3D platformer. That's sort of set in an underwater world that's like fueled and also ruined by human trash. A lot of that going around in this game. You play as Krill, who's a hermit crab, who has his shell, his home, confiscated by a plastic shark. And on behalf of the Duchess of the Sea for failure to pay taxes, which is like a really silly premise, a bit thin, like it's a bit, and he goes on a journey to get his shell back, and that's sort of how the game opens. And it is a bit silly and a bit thin, but like the story quickly evolves and sort of takes some unexpected turns. It actually ends up being much more fleshed out than that.
That's funny because, for me, I think like that kind of like cartoony setup like feels like it works for the kind of style of the game, but the idea that it kind of swerves and hits maybe a deeper note is very interesting to me.
Yeah, you're going to hear a lot of this as I talk about this game, but like my experience at the very beginning of the game and my experience by the very end of the game are very, very different.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I'll get into that. First of all, let's talk a bit more about, like, you said about how it's quite colourful and like cartoony. Well, one of the sort of the key things about other Souls games is, usually the world, they're pretty hopeless, right? They're pretty grey, they're pretty dull. It's usually like an already lost world. You're sort of exploring these remnants of ancient dead societies and the corrupt remains of the people, blah, 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 blah. And Another Crab's Treasure is obviously set in a whimsical underwater land of adventure and fun, right? So they do a really nice job of doing this by using like human trash, and these characters aren't really aware that the trash that they are wearing as clothes and that they are living in and they are using as currency and all of that stuff, that it's killing them. There's sort of like this gorgeous underwater, colourful, fun sort of SpongeBob-like world. And then just absolutely just ruined with like piles of trash and cigarette butts and
wow. And the game, like, does it meaningfully grapple with that in the story? Like, is that something that like kind of ends up becoming a theme of the work, or is it kind of
sort of yeah?
Okay.
There's a lot of that kind of like politics in this game, but it's sort of wrapped up in a humorous way where like the microplastics is like the currency, like the souls of this game, and like you kill enemies and you take their microplastics and you trade that in.
That's so good. Oh my god, that's really messed up.
And all of the characters, there's like a capitalism sort of like thing here where the people that own all the trash control everything, and they're so excited for when the trash starts raining down from the sky because it's like, cool, more money for us. And there's a guy who like runs all the trash, and he's in charge because he has the most trash. And sort of the way that sort of Krill's character and the other characters sort of respond to this, where these other characters are so entrenched in it that they, they see it as a joyous thing, and the way that Krill sees it is it's like, he's just clueless to it all because he lives by himself in this sort of idyllic. He starts off quite happy-go-lucky. He's just like, I just want my shell back, and by the end, he's like, why do you get to decide who controls this and who has all this trash and stuff like that?
He's like seen the corruption of the world.
Yeah,
around
basically,
him.
yeah. It's
That's
there's
awesome.
like a good sense of humor about it as well. Yeah, it's interesting because it's not. I guess it's not taking like a serious. I mean, it's obviously making a point, but it's not taking like a serious stance on it. There's like a lot of sense of humor in here. Like there's lots of. Puns.
I think that's the thing, right? Is like good political humor. Like it's still like there's a way to present things like that in a way that is kind of like subtextual. Where it's like
it's good satire, I guess.
Yeah,
where you don't even know it's happening in front of you.
Like, are you familiar with the film Porco Rosso at all by Hayao Miyazaki?
No.
It's a Studio Ghibli film. Like that's like a great like kind of it seems analogous to that in a way because it's like the kind of like antagonist of the film is fascism during World War II,
okay,
but it's like
cool.
it's not ever like a thing that we're gonna go and like physically fight. It's more like the kind of like backdrop under which like all the story that's happening that you do have context for, like you understand that the root of all suffering is this kind of like giant other thing that is not even really, it's just felt. It's not and it's interesting that it seems like it kind of does that as well, where it's like its commentary is kind of like both subtextual in that it's talking about how capitalism is affecting the like the underwater world in a physical way that like human waste is impacting them, but that it also is then kind of like mirrored through like the crustacean society and the fact that it's like this kind of currency and that it's this source of power and influence and all that stuff is very interesting.
It is layered in like you say, like there's the obvious, we are destroying the oceans, but there's also, like you say, there's the people who live in the oceans that are just like, yes, give me more of this, give me more capitalism because it works, whereas clearly there's people are struggling and there's like a class system in this.
It's leading to suffering, right? Like it's
yeah. There's a class system in the towns where like there's the upper deckers and the bottom deckers, and the bottom deckers are like, oh, I wish I could be an upper decker, but I can't afford it, and then sort of the people up top are like going, oh, don't talk to the lower deckers, but there's a lot of sort of that sort of stuff, and it's not it's not subtle about the way that it does show off the trash. Like there's literally the first area of the game is like a plastic road with cigarette butts lining everywhere, and there's glass bottles are dotted around and like open food packets and stuff like that. There's a lot of like there's the main town in the game has everyone lives in a bottle. There's like a keyboard that's sort of just, it's just all actual human objects that we are sort of aware of. I'll give you a list of some of the things here. We've got there's like a Spam container, there's a Yakult bottle, there's a rubber duck, there's printer cartridges, there's Rubik's cubes, there's PC mice, there's all sorts of things sort of like that we are that are real life human objects that are recognizable, and like brands as well. There's like an Old Bay reference where there's like an Old Bay style packet, they've just changed the name of it. There's a lot of like actual like these are human things that you recognize. So there's clearly they're trying to sort of make a point about our trash here. I'll start talking about the combat in a second, but like I said before, I think it's interesting how like at the start of the game, because what I said earlier about like being like the first area of the game, it's cigarette butts, rose, and it's sort of there's like a beach theme to it, and it's sort of like at the beginning it's more open, and there's you're sort of getting the idea that like you're in this big sandy area and it's full of trash, and you sort of like you're getting the idea of what's going on here. You're sort of getting the idea of, I think it's just laying down very clearly to you, this is very nice, but there's rubbish everywhere, and it's quite open, and everywhere you go there's like broken bottles and things like that. And at the beginning I was a bit like, yeah, okay, like I get what it's saying to me. It's sort of beating me over the head with this a little bit, and like it's funny, but like, is the joke wearing thin? But I was I was really surprised how much as the story evolved and changed that like you said, it did start to get deeper. It did start to open up. It did start to add some depth to the characters and some depth to the story and stuff that I feel like was really, really interesting. And the deeper in the game it goes, it's rare to see a game have this kind of legs where it gets better as it goes. As
like it just continues to build on itself so naturally.
There've been so many games where I've said, like when I've done reviews or I've played them, I'm just like, oh, that last act could have done with a bit more. Whereas this game just seems to be like, oh, that first act could have been a bit better. But then the last, then it just gets better. Then by the third act, you're like, oh man, like this is so much better than how I started the game.
That's good.
Like, you're not looking for the ending, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I guess that makes sense a little bit for what kind of game it is, right? The idea that like the early, the fact that they maybe want it to be like a slightly more approachable, like Souls-like, I think like having the first area be a little bit less intense is probably, a good way to kind of like, excuse my pun, I guess, but like let players get their feet wet a little bit and kind of get familiar with like how, like what the rhythm of the battles are. Right? Because it's like if you've never played a game like that before, like that kind of combat, I think is, it's more aggressive than probably what a lot of players are used to, and like being able to kind of inundate yourself in that before you get to the denser areas, that are a little bit more, challenging and rewarding, like you said. That makes sense, I guess.
Especially if you're being lured in by the sort of the bright, colorful visuals that you might
that you like think it's just a platformer, right? And it's like you're not maybe expecting it to have like that level of combat. Whereas like you're somebody that is pretty seasoned in action games, so the idea that you maybe found it to be a little pedestrian makes sense to me. I think I'm glad that it has a good arc like that though, because I think like that's the sign of a really good beginner friendly game, that you could come in fresh and figure it out and like learn the rhythm, and then by the time you get to the end you are actually getting a real challenge. And like when you do maybe want to go check out another Souls game, like hopefully you'll have honed enough skills that'll be applicable that you could get into something that's the baseline is harder.
Yeah, you can get your timings right. Let's talk about the combat while we're there. So, you start off quite simple. You've only ever got one weapon. So, like the thing about Souls games that I really like is sort of experimenting with builds. That's what I think I like. But I always end up just finding the one weapon I like, and then I'll get really good with that weapon, and that will carry me through the whole game. Right? I do it in every Souls game. I always end up finding the butcher's knife after being like, oh, maybe this time I'll have a saber, or I'll have like I'll go different this time, but I always end up going for a big weapon. So in this one you always have the same fork, and you always have the same sort of like combo of attacks. You hit, and then you can block and you can dodge. There is a skill tree in this, so I'm not a huge skill tree fan. You guys spoke about skill trees on the FlipScreen Games or the Steam Deck podcast last week. I can't remember which one it was now.
I think it was Steam Deck.
I think it was Steam Deck, and I agree with Steve there. I'm not a huge skill tree guy, and this one's fine, but it does what I don't like about skill trees, where it's not designed for you to make a choice, it's designed for you to complete. So it's just all of the skills on there are like, it's not like you're going, I'm going to pick this specific path, and that's who my character is. It's like, okay, cool, I'm going to finish this, and I was able to finish the whole skill tree quite easily. And that unlocks things like a parry, like a riposte, some defensive moves. It adds like some extra abilities, like it takes something from Bloodborne where like if you get hit, you can hit back and recover some sort of shell damage. We'll get shells in a second. So there's like ways that you can sort of customize, but with the skill tree, you just trying to get them all basically. There are ways you can customize with these modifiers called stowaways. They're like little sea critters. They could be like a barnacle or a little star or a little urchin or whatever. And they essentially live inside your shell. So as long as you have that shell on, you can have like, I don't know, a bonus to your attack. Or I had one where I had like +4 attack but -3 defense, for example. So I was like trying to play a bit like a glass cannon. There's one I had where like it makes your attacks are slower but your damage is higher. So you can also have the opposite where your attacks are faster but your damage is lower. So I wanted to go for like a heavier build, so I ended up sort of putting on the heavier one. So I was attacking slow, but I was doing big hits. And all of the things I mentioned before, like the spam, the Yakult, the rubber ducks, the print cartridges, they're all shells that you can find throughout the game. There's like tin cans, there's soda cans. There's all these different objects that are just dotted all around the map that you can just walk up to, put on, and that acts as your shell. It acts as your armor. It acts as your shield. It determines your defense. It determines what spell you can cast. So like that is a huge element of the combat. Is like, what shell am I wearing, and what does it let me do? Does it slow me down? Because in Dark Souls, go on.
Talk to me about that a little bit, because when I played the demo, it felt very to me like what kind of shell you were getting felt kind of like at the whim of what was available, and I'm wondering how that evolves over time. Like, is it the kind of thing where it's like, obviously it's not like a roguelike in the fact that like you're like doing multiple runs, but like, how like obviously in like a roguelike or a roguelike game, you're kind of like making decisions on the fly based on what's presented to you. So it'll be like, okay, I have a heavy shell, so right now I'm playing a heavy style. Or is it like, can you kind of, like as your skill tree advances, is there a way for you to like hold on to a certain kind of shell for longer, or like repair it if it gets damaged, or, make it so that you spawn with like a certain kind of shell, or anything where you can have like more control?
Yeah, so there's a shop in the town where you can buy shells. The shells that you find out around, and the shells that you can buy. When you buy the shell, it comes with insurance. But you can also then, any shell that you find, you can go to the shop and buy insurance for the shells that you find that are in your collection. Essentially, when you insure it, you pick one shell in the sort of the menu, like the bonfire type area where you go and you can relax and level up and stuff like that. You can pick one shell, and that is your insured shell. When you die, that is the shell that you always spawn with.
And can you change? So, like, if I say, like, I unlock like the tin can, right? When I go to that bonfire, do I have to have that equipped to make that my insured shell, or is it like once you unlock it once, if I turn the game off, come back on, can I just pick that one anytime? It's in my library.
As long as it's new. So once you wear it once, it's in your collection forever. I found all but 2 shells, so I was able to sort of like pick any of them, and I got insurance on quite a lot of them.
So you got a decent amount of control there, then.
Yes, yeah, and the shells do. They do more because it's not just about how heavy you are and how much defense you have. It's also magic spells. Each shell has its own spell. They're not unique. Like there's like, you can tell based on sometimes looking at a shell. Oh, that's made of glass, therefore it's going to have this specific shell spell.
Okay, so it's kind of like based on what
it's heavy.
It's kind of based on what type of shell it is.
And sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. There's somewhere it's like, oh, it's a spring, so you can like you pop out and like do a quick attack, but that's also bottle caps as well. There's like some that are like heavy sort of metal ones that are like, oh, you withhold attacks. You do it and you're invincible for a period of time. There's some that like explode, like it's a shotgun shell or whatever. So they sort of do different things. You end up usually you'd end up favoring shells based on the spell they've got. However, I
like you said savoring. You got crustaceans on the mind. You're like,
I really do. My mouth's watering just thinking about it.
Those nice savory combat options.
Umami is the magic power of the underwater world. You have your umami powers,
flavor.
and you're channeling you're in a umami to cast these magic spells. So I actually wasn't a big spell guy throughout the game. As I said before, I like to pick my weapon and go with it. And I actually, when I unlocked a skill, there's a skill.
So hold on, you say you weren't a big spell guy. You activate the spells, or is it just like they have the?
You activate them, yeah.
Okay.
So you press X on an Xbox controller, X.
So you
that'd be square, I guess.
And you just found it didn't play to your combat strengths.
No. Well, so I just was using. So you would favor a shell for its spell half the time. You might insure a shell because you like that spell. I was insuring shells for a different reason, because when I unlocked the skill tree that lets you turn a shell into a hammer, and that hammer's health, every time you do damage, it takes off of the shell's health, and your shell can break, your shell can be destroyed while you're wearing it. So what I was favoring was big, hefty shells that would make me slow usually, but because I'm using it as a hammer, that doesn't affect that. I was going for the biggest amount of health I could, because I was like, I had a sort of extra shell damage, I had extra knockout damage, I had extra attack, and I had all these things put on that were specifically so that I could walk up to somebody with my big fucking hammer, which had like a big pipe at the end of it, and I could just be doing huge hits, because I wasn't about fucking around. I was about big hammer hits. So I wasn't favoring my shells based on the spells. Therefore, I wasn't really using the spells because I was just using anything as a shell. Okay, cool. There's a spring here. All I'm trying to do is combat. All I'm trying to do is all I'm trying to do is take these hits, or just use it defensively. I'm not trying to use it for the spell because all I want to do is just go whack, whack, you're dead. But that, I think, because I was playing it that way, made some of the later bosses trivial. Going up to these sort of end game bosses with these big hits, and I was taking them out in like 2 or 3 hits, and then my partner Kat was saying to me like, "Oh, this game seems pretty easy," and I was like, "No, I've broken it. I've just like put all of the skills in the right space. I've picked all the right stuff. I'm just like I've min-maxed this game where I just walk up and I just whack and things die."
So I mean, I think that's kind of interesting because I know you did kind of say that you feel like maybe it doesn't have as much customization as you might expect from a Souls-like game because there's only the one weapon, but I guess that does kind of seem like there's a good amount of variance because if you didn't play with a hammer, like that would be a totally different play style, right? Like you'd be favoring defense instead of offense, and you'd maybe be, playing things in like a less glass cannon-y way.
Yeah, you can play like, you could favor spells or you could sort of speed yourself up or whatever, but it's not like you've got a lance or you've got a lot, a ton of range.
I hear what you're saying. It's definitely like still, it's a truncated amount of options, but I think it speaks to the idea of like allowing players to kind of like play to their skill set, and as like an experienced action game player, like you can go all out on offense, and other people who maybe just don't have that ability, like could rely on those other tools in kind of a more defensive kind of way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess I was able, because I'm quite good at parrying and things like that, that I was able to pick like, oh, okay, I don't care what I've got because I'm not going to take any shell damage anyway because I'm just going to, oh, you're trying to hit me, bang. No, you're not. I'm hitting, So yeah, I guess maybe there is customization in that way, but I just feel like it's not as varied. It's not like in a Souls game or Elden Ring or whatever. It's a role-playing game. You can pick and choose what you're doing. This just has levels in the skill tree. I wouldn't call it an RPG. It is definitely an action game or an action adventure game.
Yeah. But streamlined.
So yeah, there is.
It's like definitely not intended for you to have that same level of experimentation with like class or whatever, right? It's more about mastering the tools that are presented in front of you. Yeah,
and there are other ways to sort of make yourself OP. Like I said about spells aren't the only way to use magic. There are things called adaptations that are they've got different spells. You've got like one that's I don't want to spoil any of them really, but there's one that's like just a claw, like a magic claw that shoots out in front of you. So if you don't have a shell on, you can still use a magic attack. You can still sort of use a stronger attack, even if you're like, in a bit of a pinch here, bang, I'll still do a quick hit. Still use that umami for a good purpose. And the same with there's like a bomb you can throw, and like you pepper those in as you're playing. I use those more than the umami spells just because I was like, it's quite handy to be able to like chuck a bomb against a boss, get a bit of distance while I am healing or something like that. Keep them over there, keep them some damage on them and stuff like that. That's so there is like there's other ways to use the spells, but that is quite OP, and that very much sticks to Souls games where like magic is OP.
It like exists to be a crutch. I feel like if you don't, if you're not, if you're not getting on with like just being able to beat someone with raw combat, it's like give you some tools to like cheese a little bit, and like give yourself like like you said, right? If you're in a pinch, right, you have a kind of a safety net that you can take advantage of, and not feel like your progress is going to get punished because you're just not that good.
There is one thing about the hammer aspect that I think wasn't well thought out that I wanted to mention while we're talking about it, and that is there's a move you can do, you unlock on the skill tree, where if you do enough like damage to an enemy, you can basically knock them prone. You fill up like a empty their stamina bar, they go prone, you get a chance to do a big attack, right? And that big attack does like does a sizable chunk, it knocks them down for a little bit, but no matter how much damage you do to them, it 100% always breaks your hammer. The hammer just breaks. Even if you've got. So I had like the strongest shell in the whole game. I won't spoil what it is, but I had the strongest shell in the whole game. It's got like vastly more health than anything else in the game. If I knocked down the most basic enemy with another attack that puts him prone, and then I use that, I break my shell 100% of the time, and that is a shame because it meant I didn't want to do it, and I would knock an enemy prone. I'd then have to sort of stop and wait for that to happen because otherwise I'm going to break my hammer. And I feel like I don't know if that was just wasn't thought of, or if it sort of doesn't let you get the full potential of the combat for that reason. And I think that's. I
wonder if part of the kind of thought there is that they want to limit your usage of that because it's so powerful.
Well, it's not that powerful. Like my hits of the hammer were doing more damage than that. Like each hit of the hammer took more off of the boss's health than that special attack. Because as I'm hitting it,
okay, interesting.
So when I do it, all I do is it just breaks my hammer. And if I accidentally did it, I was like, oh, now I'm at a disadvantage because I've built around having a hammer, and I've just broke it doing a hit that does less damage than my one hammer hit. And I just think that was a shame, and it really put me off using it. And I want to bring that up just because I want to warn people: don't use that if you're going to go hammer because you will break your shell.
There's your PSA.
Yes, there's my PSA. There's sort of other things you can do. If you're playing slow like I did, or if you want to play like a nimble character, there's a grappling hook you can use. Adds a little bit of extra sort of layers, I guess, to the combat. You can bring enemies closer to you. You can take yourself over to an enemy. You can pick up a shell from afar. There's even like exclusive shells. I think the last 2 shells that I'm missing are somewhere in the environment because I found one in the environment. And I think they're just like, if I looked around, I'd find a shell that would fill in the last 2 spaces for me. But it sort of reminds me of Sekiro, where you like latch onto something and there's like a cool animation where you go like, and then you drag yourself up to something.
Yeah, I remember that.
Zooms in and out. And you can, it's not just for combat. You can also use it to get around. Like you can explore the levels. It adds some verticality to the levels. It adds some sort of like, oh, what's that over there? I'll go and explore over there. And it sort of makes it feel more like that 3D platformer that. But it is, it's not just about being sort of boots on the ground or, stuck to the floor and just doing rolls. You can jump around. There's some platforming challenges. There's some just some cool level design where
it feels very reminiscent of like PS2 platformers to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah, but I did find some of this stuff a bit buggy in like the same way that it might have done on like PS1 or PS2, where like, did you notice when you were climbing on the nets that there's like a weird. All it does is it like cinches the texture in on you, and it just looks quite cheap. It looks like for a game of this sort of quality, and like there's a lot of effort gone into animations, a lot of gone into the characters and stuff like this. To just have like a really weird pinched in, it just felt quite cheap at like texture animation.
It felt like a bit like a cut corner for sure.
Yeah,
and I think the
whole.
I was gonna just say, I think to your point, the fact that like everything feels so well realized. I think like when you have those moments where like you do identify something that feels like a cut corner, right? And like I don't even necessarily mean that in like a super like pejorative way. It's just the reality of a creative project, right? It's like at some point you're going to make a compromise, and if it's like, well, we want to have every enemy have these really dynamic, unique animations, and like you're going to cut corners somewhere. It's a shame to have it be a thing that you're going to see as often as a climbing animation, because it probably makes it stick out. But
and it is like, it's not a huge. I'm not saying like, oh, the game's ruined because of this, but like I feel like if it wasn't there, I wouldn't have noticed it every single time I climbed and been like, oh, it's a shame.
Yeah,
there's a few other things with
the
climbing as well, like the hitboxes. When you hit like the top of a climb, the apex of the climb, you're climbing onto the platform you're on. Sometimes you'll get stuck, or you just won't be able to climb up, or you'll start climbing up and you'll just fall again because there's sort of like a weird clippy hitbox or something like that. And there's also like these balls and nets, like a ball like floating with net all around it, or a net that's hanging from the ceiling. And because it's spherical and it's not just a flat plane, you'll be climbing up it, and the game will just decide, nah, you're not holding on anymore, and I'll just start falling. And sometimes that is, oh god, I've got to start this climb again, or sometimes it's, oh, I've fallen into a pit and I've been kicked back and I've taken some damage, and it's like, how like, I'm trying to do this intricate, there's already spikes I've got to avoid and stuff like that, and then you hit a point where, because it's a curve, it's suddenly like, nah, you've dropped off, and it's, it is a shame, and it's just a little bit. It's the kind of thing I thought would get picked up more in testing. It does feel like you say, it feels like it's like a PS2 game in that way of like, there was jank in that time, but I don't feel like this is intentional. This is just like, maybe this is a feature that hasn't been tested as much, but it's all throughout the game, so I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's just one of those things where sometimes like, like if the focus was combat and the combat is really good, then it's like, yeah, like maybe the platforming, there are just rough edges to it. Cause it's like, to your point, there was a lot about it that you did respond to, right? Like the verticality and everything. And it's like, it's not that it's bad. It's just that like, it's maybe underdeveloped compared to the other parts of the game that are so well realized. And I think
Yeah.
that is the thing that always like sticks out in any game, right? Where it's like if part of it is really solid and then something else feels like, again, like even just good, right? Like if combat feels great and platforming feels good to okay, it's going to stick out as the weaker part of the experience. And
Yes.
particularly if there's only like a few things about it that don't work, then it's like they're really going to stick out like a sore thumb, because it's like, oh man, like so much of this experience feels premium and seamless, and then you've got, you know, this rough edge that I'm falling off of or whatever, right? And it's like, you know, it's the kind of thing that will probably get patched out over time or whatever as they have, you know, more feedback from users, because it's like it's that, you know, I don't even know if I would say it's an adage. It's just like a point of fact, right? That like even if you have all the testing resources in the world, like when your game gets released to players on day one, like more time has been spent with it than you ever could have paid to test.
Yeah,
you know, it's just a finite amount of, you know, like resources you can reasonably put towards QA, right? So it's like one of those things that, like, you know, if that's a regular talking point, they'll probably get that smoothed out eventually, right?
Yeah,
you hope anyway.
I agree with you there. Yeah, and like you said earlier about the animations, like for the enemies, like the bosses definitely have that, like the you know, to sort of fight a boss that's like really, you know, he's got like a really like cool design to him. He's got like a bottle weapon that you can break in the second half of the fight. There's always things that have really got thought into. But on the way to that boss fight, I'm climbing up a little like weird little, you know, piece of net that just looks odd, and it's like there's such a weird difference there of like these really high quality, well designed, like cool, well thought out boss fights with these like amazing, like horrible, like giant crabs that have got like, I don't know, bits of wire wrapped around them, and like you know, there's a theme to him. You know, there's a guy who's like he starts off like a samurai, I guess, with a pair of chopsticks, and halfway through the game he breaks them in half, and then he's got like a hammer and then like a small sword.
That's really cool.
Chopsticks off, and like that stuff's really cool. To then have like, oh, you know, I've fallen off a ball like immediately before that. You know, it's just odd, but yeah, the boss fights are great. There's some hidden ones throughout. There's one I actually didn't find till I beat the game. Oh, excuse me. And I was just sort of running around, and I was like, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I was like, I feel like in a video game I can usually do this thing. And I realized I hadn't seen it in this game, and I thought this game seems right for it. So I tried to do the thing, and there was a boss fight waiting for me straight in there. And
I love a hidden optional boss fight. That's fun.
Oh yeah, there's a few of them. There's some really, like, there's a point where like I did a bunch of exploring. I know, I think I said before about sometimes that there's you know, the areas can be quite like wide but shallow, whereas some of them are like, oh, I'm on this like winding adventure, where am I going? And you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, there's a boss fight here, cool. And you beat the boss, and it's like, that was all that was for. Great, because that was a really cool, unique experience. It's a shame I've broken the game, so now I'm doing it in like 2 minutes. But I
think it's like, you know, you have chops, right? And it's like that's a it's you know, it's the difference. You know, it's like I feel like I always talk about how like if you're playing through like the main game of Pokemon, right? It's like baby's first RPG, and it's like if you want to get into something that's like deeper and more tough, right? Like it's like you graduate to something like Persona, or you get into competitive, and it's like, you know, I feel like this probably has that similar, like, this is a great baby's first, and I mean that affectionately, but like baby's first Souls game, right? And then maybe you graduate to like Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor, right? And then it's like, and then you graduate to Dark Souls and you know, Elden Ring and the big dogs, you know, Bloodborne.
There is actually a Bloodborne reference in this where one of the characters, it took me like 3 times meeting this character where I was like, hang on a minute, has he got a switch weapon, whatever you call it, I can't remember what it's called now, trick weapon, and a blunderbuss and a cap? And I was like, that's the hunter from Bloodborne that I've been speaking to.
That's
that I've
so
met
funny.
Like 3 times, and I was like, oh wow,
that.
Great. Like, there's a lot of that. There's a big area in the game called the Sands Between, which is the lands between in Elden Ring for you who didn't play it. And the Old Bay is Elden Bay. Like, you know, there's a lot of like references to these.
The
these
Old
sort of things,
Bay. That's so funny.
Elden Bay. Good.
That's so good. Awesome. Well, yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the world in just a second here, but before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of April. For the last time, they are Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Lenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You're all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go above and beyond and show your support just like they did, you can head over to patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. But if you don't have any money to toss our way, you don't want those extra perks and goodies, you don't want to go above and beyond, but guess what? There's a ton of ways that you can still show your support, get involved in the community, and get some more cool content. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web. You can check out our sister shows, Nintendo Noise and the Steam Deck Podcast. You can join our Discord and write into the show. Keep the conversation rolling between episodes with a bunch of other cool gamers just like you. However you choose to get involved or show your support, thank you for tuning into another episode of the podcast. So, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the environments, because something that I experienced in the demo, right, was that like there's kind of like, to me, the rhythm seemed to be you have kind of the ascent right to the boss fight, and you're like fighting general enemies. You're collecting the gear that you're going to use as you're kind of going through the platforming challenges and some of the like grappling stuff. And then you get to an arena where there's a boss fight. Is that kind of the general pace?
Yeah, basically, yeah. There's areas that are more open than others, and there are areas that are, completely sort of closed off, more like a traditional sort of Dark Souls-y, a cave or like a linear thing. But
So,
there's also
Talk to me about that. Like when you say it's more open, what does that mean? It's like, I know you said like there was like an optional boss fight you could find, but is that like you're running in random enemy directions and finding enemies? Is it like you're having to navigate to find where you're going? Or is it like there's a path you're supposed to follow, but you can go off the beaten path and find things? Like, what are we talking about?
A bit of both. Depends on the area. So there's some areas that are like, it's like an open area, but there's like layers to it, and there's ways where you can only go certain ways because there's things that are gated off. You need to unlock shortcuts, similar to sort of old previous other Souls games.
Sure.
But there are areas that are more like, here's a large area, explore it to your sort of however you want to explore it. But there's like sometimes there's an obstacle. There's like a swamp type area where all of the floors are like covered in oil, and if you go on the oil you get poisoned, so you want to avoid that. So you could just run across it, but because of the oil you are sort of stuck to this path. But like you said, there are some areas where you'll be going and you'll be like, this feels like the right way, and I don't want to go the right way. I want to go the wrong way for a bit, and you'll sort of go off the beaten path a bit, and you'll find something new. I think generally the first time you go for an area, there is a lot of like you're going the one way, and then you unlock something as you're going. You open up a door, you change a bit of the environment, and then you're like, oh cool, I can actually go through here now. But there's also going to be split paths where you can go, okay, I can either go this way or this way, and one of those ways might have an optional boss with a weapon at the end of it or something like that, or like an attack at the end of it, a spell, sorry, or like a unique shell, or like an adaptation or something like that. Or there's going to be the way that's like, this is the way we want you to go, and there's a boss here. Or there's even sort of areas where it's just like, you're generally looking for, like in a Souls game, the next bonfire, which is a moon snail shell, or a boss. So you are sort of like moving through the area and through the areas, trying to find sort of the next landmark, whether that be a boss or a shell. But there is also, elements of, explore at your own leisure, see what you can find. There's an area, the Sands Between I mentioned before. There's a bit like, the beginning of the game when you first go there, or about, I don't know, a couple of hours in, you really have to stick to the path for a reason I won't spoil. And then later in the game, you can now explore around, and there's loads to do in that area. There's so many like little nooks and crannies. There's loads of like hidden areas, loads of hidden items. There's places to go back to that you sort of maybe saw before, and now you think you can go back to it. And there's different ways where you can sort of explore. And I think it does make it feel quite samey, and it can get quite tiresome at times, especially when it's too open and there's like not really much guiding you. But there are areas, like I said, that sort of point you in a direction and they go, here you go, but that has branching paths, and they're the more rewarding ones. They're the better ones to explore. I think they come later in the game, like I said, about how the deeper into the game you go, the better it gets. And I feel like they sort of just got more of an idea of the design they were going for. They got more of that, like, okay, cool, maybe we're not an open world game. Let's do more complicated paths. Let's do more complicated platforming. Let's do more, hidden puzzles and like secret ways and things like that. And that really does come into its own towards sort of the latter half of the game. I cannot explain to you how like the first hour I had with the game, or the first 2 hours of the game, I actually didn't like it. I was like, this is a bit samey. I kept getting like stuck on the environments, which I'll get to in a second. Like I kept having to like kill myself in the game to sort of progress. The first boss, I was just like, but by like at least halfway through, possibly less than that, I was like, oh, I like this. And by the end, I was like, oh, I'm really sad this is over. Like I'm really having a good time now. I understand this.
Nice.
And then even then spurred me on to go back to these previous areas. Now I had sort of more of a knowledge of the world and things like that, and explore and see what I've missed. And there were things that I missed. Like I said before, there was a boss that I missed because I'd completely overlooked the thing that as soon as I saw it, it was obvious to me. Like, oh, of course, there's something there. So that there's a lot of it. The game grows and you grow with it. In that way. But I do want to talk about what I mentioned a second ago about getting stuck on the environments, because while for how well designed some of the areas are and how well sort of like thought out a lot of it is, there is some of it where it felt a bit amateur right at the beginning, where like even like the first area of the game, the first half an hour of the game, I was walking and I was like, I saw what looked like a little like hidden way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, it's obviously going to be a secret down here. And I took a step in, and then I just sort of like slid slightly down, and then my character was just floating forever. And there was no way for me to turn around. There's no way for me to sort of teleport out. I just had to die. And I lost the microplastics I had, which was annoying. And I was like, oh. And then I thought, right, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm not going to sort of just hop into little areas. I then climbed up like a sandcastle that had been tilted over, and I was like, oh, I wonder if there's something in this turret. Hopped in the turret, there I am, floating again. And I was like, oh, come on, like this has just happened. And there was one time when I'd sort of like in one of the areas, I had 2 like whole levels worth of microplastics. I've been playing for a while. I just sort of like narrowly got around this area. I unlocked a shortcut back to the moon snail shell, and I was like, I'm not going to go back just yet. I'm going to push on a bit further. And there was like a couple of options I could have gone, and I was like, I'm going to see what's over here, because there's like a floating platform that takes me over here. There's got to be something over here. I went over there, and it was like a, I don't know, bit of coral or something, and there was another bit of coral underneath it, and I was like, that's where the thing must be that I'm over here for, because there's nothing else I can see here. So I dropped down, and there's nothing there, and there's no way for me to get back up, and I'm trapped, and I'm trying everything, right? I'm like, right, if I climb up here, can I go over here? Everywhere I tried to do anything, I would fall and die.
So frustrating.
And eventually I just had to, let myself die, and then I was like, cool, now I just have 2 levels worth of microplastics over there that I now can't touch. And when I could eventually go back, even at like, when I eventually went back there, when I was like towards the end of the game's wrapping up, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that thing, and I sort of did the right way round to get to where that I needed to be, I was still wary about dropping down accidentally and just losing all the stuff that I'd picked up, because it could so easily be done. All I could do is like either look down and go, oh, there's a platform there, or if I just fell, I'd be screwed. There's nowhere for me to go. There are items you can use to, if you die, you keep your microplastics. But I hadn't thought of that until after I'd sort of had to leave them there, and I was like, oh,
yeah, and it's also
shame,
it's frustrating to be put in a position where you're not sure. Like the game is telling you that you should be exploring, and it's rewarding you for exploring, but then there are like kind of these areas where you can where that can be a detriment to you, right? Because you can kind of go beyond the confines of what the game expected, and obviously like on some level, like that kind of thing is natural, like it's going to happen in pretty much any game.
Yeah.
But for you to kind of like have it happen multiple times to the point where then you have to feel like you were punished for exploring, right? Because the game didn't signpost to you well like what was explorable and what wasn't.
Yeah, there's bits that look like you can just climb all over it. Like Mario Odyssey is an example I've written down here, where in Mario Odyssey there's an idea of like, if I think I can get up somewhere, I'll try my very hardest. And there are times where you do a good combination of wall jumps and using your abilities and backflips and also throwing your hat and stuff like that, and you get somewhere and you're just outside of the confines of the thing, and there's like a little pile of coins, and the developers are basically like, good job, like you got up here,
good
there's
job, you did it, buddy.
Coins, but here's a little something, like you did that because the game lets you do that. Whereas this game, I would sort of be like, it looks like I can get out there if I do enough platforming. And you do a bunch of platforming and you get up there, and then there's nothing. You end up just like slipping down, or you're up the top.
Yeah, you
and you
cheesed it.
See down. Yeah, you're just like, oh, okay, what was the point of that? Whereas what they could have done is just had, I don't know, that platform be slightly higher, so I wouldn't have wasted my time going, right, jump to see what's up there. And Or even if I don't know, it just felt like there could have been more signposting. There could have been more obvious, like there's nothing up here, man. Because sometimes you would go somewhere and there would be something, but sometimes you go for a lot of effort to climb up something and there'd be nothing there.
Yeah, and that ends up feeling frustrating, right? Because it's like that was a thing I talked about a little bit a couple weeks ago when we were talking about like Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it was like, oh yeah, sometimes I get funneled somewhere and there's like no reason to be there, and it's like that just feels frustrating because it's like it discourages you from wanting to explore. Whereas like you brought up Odyssey, or like I think of like Breath of the Wild, right, or Tears of the Kingdom, where it's like there's a thing. Right, it's like there's a rock here and you pick it up and there's a Korok seed or something, or there's a moon right on this corner that you found or whatever. Right, like there's a reason, and it never feels like you just you never have that moment where you're like, I wonder if, and the answer's no. Right?
Yes.
Like in that,
it's improv. It's like yes and.
Yeah, and it's like this game doesn't need to hit that level, but I think like if you're gonna be doing the whole like, we want you to explore these areas and we're going to reward you for that, I think signposting and like having really clear boundaries is important, because otherwise like you run into this situation where either, like there's a glitch or something like that that's obviously more impactful to the player's experience. But I think then there's also just like the basic experience of like, oh, the game taught me to explore, and then I explore and I find that the world's actually smaller than I thought it was, right? And it's like, a world doesn't need to be big and deep to feel big and deep.
Yeah, just in showing you that it's not as big and deep as you might think, it knocks you out of the immersion a bit. And that first hour of the game, or that first 2 hours, I was just like, constantly having points of like, I've got to kill myself or start again, or even like one of the because it's quite a large open area, and then it was like a little second large open area, and I was like, what's over there? And you start walking and you hit an invisible wall, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, why couldn't you have made this a cove? Why couldn't you have put like
create some artificial boundary for me so that I don't feel like, oh, I can see this place over here and I'm not actually supposed to interact with it,
Yeah, there's a point as well where there's like a gate. Maybe it's, I don't know, planned DLC or something, but there's like a gate, and I was like, oh, I'm sure I'll open that gate later. Got to the end of the game and I was like, oh, I never went back to that gate. And I went back to the gate and I was trying to get through and work out what was nearby and what I could climb. And I looked at the map and I was like, okay, it doesn't seem like there's actually anything behind there. So why is there a gate that I can see through and see turrets? And I'm sure it connects to another point of the map maybe somewhere, but there's nothing actually over there. It's just they just showed it to you for some reason. So yeah. But yeah, that's sort of like, that's my only real sort of like my nitpicks.
Gotcha.
There's a couple more nitpicks I want to mention, actually, just if the developers listen to this. Not all of the achievements I unlocked popped. I have done all but 4 achievements in the game, but actually 3 of those 4 I definitely 100% did. For like collecting all of the magic spells, the collecting a specific shell right at the end of the game, and leveling up my fork to the max level. I did all of those 100%. There's the similar to Dark Souls, where you have like your potions, you have these heart kelps. You press a button to take your heart kelp, that's fine. There are heart kelps dotted around that you can find, that's fine. But when you pick up the heart kelp from the ground, instead of picking it up, it knocks it in the air and then it has to float down to you. And if I'm in the middle of a boss fight and there's a heart kelp there for me, I don't want to have to be like, whoa, like it's gonna come on, pick it up, and then once I've grabbed it, I then have to use it. That seems intuitive. I should be able to just press it and then just grab it. But also, if I actually, as I'm healing, get hit, you drop that healing item. And if you've only got like 3 or 4 of them, and you're in the middle of like a panic, like and you use like your last one, let's say, and you get hit and you drop it, you're like, oh shit, now I've got to go and somehow pick this back up and use it. And that feels a bit cruel, feels a bit unfair. It doesn't matter so much when you're towards the end and you've got like a load of them. But if you're like, this is my last one, I'm going to fight this boss, and then it hits you once and knocks it out of you, or knocks it out of your hand, that can be a bit disappointing. But yeah, those are my only nitpicks. Those are it. Change those things, or I don't know, don't change them. But take that in mind. That's my
that could be criticism. That could be like a good toggleable like difficulty kind of thing.
Yeah, and there is actually good accessibility in this. I should have mentioned when we were talking about difficulty earlier. There is a lot of like, oh, you can have it so that you don't lose all of your microplastics when you die. You can have it so that you take less damage. You could, there's when you fall, you don't take damage. There's things like that.
The Celeste kind of thing where it's like you can kind of like pick what things you want to adjust to make it simpler.
very much so.
Or
There's
more forgiving, I should say.
Yes, yeah. There's also one that where you just the game just drops a gun shell for you, like as in like the shell is a gun, not like a gun shell, like a bullet. So you wear the shell of the magic spell as just fire a bullet and it kills everything in one hit. Which there are going to be times maybe like you as a boss you really don't want to have to fight, but you want to continue on in the game.
Yeah.
Pick up the gun, shoot the boss, whatever, you know.
Cool.
That's up to you. Do it if you want. I did it for the achievement because there was an achievement that says shoot with a gun, and I was like, all right, I'll spawn the gun in. Let's see.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was quite funny when that happened because it's a really realistic gun. But
It's so funny.
I'll wrap up here. So overall, another Crab's Treasure. I really liked it. I didn't at the start. Really grew on me. Krill really grew on me. A lot of the characters like Chitin really grew on me. Just like a cool world that starts off sort of like, yeah, okay, I get this, and then starts to add depth and starts to get really interesting. And I was really interested in the story and this, you know, I really liked it. It really did. By the end of it, I wanted more, and I didn't want it to end. Which at the beginning I was like, oh no, like have I really got to somehow have I got to play this game that I'm not really enjoying? But you know, I let it take me. I got good at it, and I really enjoyed it. So, I would highly recommend it. I actually would probably say I'd give it like an 8 out of 10 if I had to give it a score. I don't know if we're doing half points. I wouldn't go as high as 9, but I'd say like 8.5.
8.5 sounds good.
Yeah, 8.5. Because I really enjoyed this towards the end. Like, I don't think that sort of a shaky beginning should be enough for that to be like a negative. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. Check this one out because it's bound to be a good one.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again for the code. Thank you all for tuning in for this review on this week's show. If you guys are planning on picking the game up for yourself, make sure you write in and let us know what you thought about it. And if you have any questions for Max or like on tips or tricks or anything like that you know he might be able to enlighten you on your crustacean filled journey, then please make sure you write in all the ways that you can by heading over to FlipScreen.games. And, you know, join the Discord, come right in to our email address, however you want to get in contact. We'd love to hear from you and read your thoughts on the show during next week's question block. And I did want to say, I know I mentioned on last week's show, I think that we were going to talk about the Fallout show. We're still going to do that at some point, but Steve and I are still watching it, and we had a game to talk about this week, so we'll get around to it. But if you're interested in that, it's still coming. So, Max, great work today. You're killing it, buddy.
Try my best. More to come. There's more to come. It doesn't end.
It never ends. The grind never ends.
Never
There's
ends.
always another taste to be tasted, huh?
Yeah.
Well, we'll end it on that note. Thank you guys for joining us here on another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. However you choose to get involved, remember FlipScreen.games is the website. Go over there, click on some stuff, show us your support, and keep on tuning into the show. We love you for doing so. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.